Thank you, Anna. I'm going to invite our other speakers to come up and take a seat here. But I want to thank you, Anna, for really giving a panoramic survey of an area that's too often kind of ignored or fallen by the side, as well as also illustrating the intense complexity of, and maybe the most difficult political situation that we have to work with. So I really thank you for bringing all that to our attention. I will just take a second to note that WJRO, if you're further interested in this topic, has on its website, we did a update to the Just Act report that the U.S. Senate had mandated the State Department to deliver. We did it for the Terrorism Conference about a week ago. So on that, you will find a link to every country, all 47 countries that took part in the original Terrorism Conference. And I thank Wesley Fisher for his really active authorship of that update. You'll find links to every country and what they've done or not done in the past 2 years. Some of the countries that we just discussed, others that we haven't had a chance to mention. And also second thanks to Ivica, wherever he is right now, back there. So the routine is the same routine as for previous Q&As. You will, basically the mic will be passed around, a chance to ask your questions. We'll get all the questions out of the way, and then the participants will have an opportunity to answer them as directed. So are there questions? Karen.
Hi, this is a question for Avi. During most of your speech, you focused on a sort of the definition of, you talked about Holocaust survivors. Yet when you talk about from Eastern Europe, most of the Holocaust survivors were flight cases. And those flight cases basically were not able to be compensated at all, but they were first compensated in 1980, which is obviously 10 years earlier than when you talked about 1990. And when they came out of Eastern Europe. So my question goes a little bit towards the definition, the changing definition of Holocaust survivors, because I think now, both in the State of Israel and in Germany and in the Claims Conference, it really, one of the biggest changes has been to include flight cases in the definition of Nazi victim, and they weren't sort of touched on your talk at all. So perhaps if you want to respond to that.
Next question, Wesley.
A naive question, but may I ask Dr. Pavlovich whether in fact, given the fact that the Serbian aspects are trying to leave, or they may try to split from Bosnia, whether that would be a good thing or a bad thing, so far as this is concerned, so far as this specific matter is concerned, so far as the property is concerned in regard to Jewish property that was taken. And the second thing is, I'd like to ask both you and Dr. Ionesco whether there is actually anything in the trials or otherwise that is actually about movable property, or whether everything is about real estate, really.
I also have a quick question for Anna, if you allow me. You have listed 3 specific items that, in your view, hinder property restitution in Bosnia. And my question is, do you think that one should also add the specific delicate reality of a tiny Jewish community in a predominantly Muslim country nowadays, and the sensitivities and the political sensitivities about that?
There in the back.
Thank you. I have a question to Stefan. You mentioned the property of single Jews or families. Could you say something about the property of Jewish organizations? Because Anna had this as part of her speech, and maybe you can add things to that, also including the Jewish communities for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, so we can begin the answers? So let's begin the answers. Oh, one more. Sorry, Vicha.
2 things. One, to thank Anna really for the good work which she did to squeeze everything what she wanted in only 8-9 minutes. Then one small remark. All of you who are familiar with the history of Jews of Balkans will stumble upon the statement that Ottoman Sultan Baz II, from the depth and the goodness of his heart, received refugees from Spain and settled the Balkans with Jews, with Sephardi Jews. The truth is definitely completely different. Sultan was pragmatic, and he needed those Jews for their knowledge of the languages, commercial connections through all Europe, for their ability to do medical work for his expanding army, and one thing which no one mentions, for their knowledge of extracting gold and silver from raw ore, and because the biggest mines were in his territory in Kosovo. And the second, somebody mentioned this question of three constitutional nations and different approach to the restitution. It's more than that. It's so difficult. I'll tell you. First, Croatian constitutional part deny any part in looting or in the destruction of Jewish community. Serbian part accepts everything because they want to join Jewish suffering with the Serbian suffering, but in the same time they told me and others of us representatives to various meetings, they will not accept anything about restitution if date of restitution, if terms of restitution will not include the property of the Serbian church in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because without that they don't accept anything. And the Muslim part is says very simple. We are not accepting 1945. We are not accepting 1941. We want to start our request for restitution from 1872 when Austria occupied Bosnia. Thank you.
Thank you, Avicii, for adding more difficulty to our already torturous process. Okay, we can begin now with the answers.
Right, so first of all, thank you very much for the very good question about flight cases. I think it kind of touches the point I was trying to make. I was actually focusing more in my presentation about the ghetto list and the changes within the definition of ghettos. But we have the same similar concept touching also on flight cases. So first, I'll quickly answer legally, and then I'll answer, I think, politically, and then from there, I hope that I've addressed your point. So legally speaking, although officially both in Israel and in Germany and worldwide, one speaks about different categories of survivors. So in Israel, it's very well known in the public political jargon that we have two circles, the first circle and the second circle. And in the second circle, we mainly relate to these flight cases. This is legally totally wrong and pointless, because in 1973 already, the Supreme Court of Israel, in the case of Stein against the Authority for the Rights of Survivors, deferred itself for the first time for the Supreme Court decision in Germany regarding flight cases, which made it clear that a person would be defined as a Holocaust survivor under the BEG if he crossed the demarcation line. So the old German jurisprudence regarding flight cases was as follows: if a person fled from a Nazi-occupied territory to a third country, crossing an international demarcation line, he is to be seen as a Holocaust survivor under Article 1 BEG from the 50s. The Schlussgesetz that I've mentioned in my presentation basically made it an empty, what we call in Hebrew, an empty law. Because when the decision was given in the late 60s in Germany, there were no new applications possible. So that kind of led, I think, to the solution of 1980, the hardship fund, which supplemented the Article 5 of the Schlussgesetz, which was the special fund for those who escaped or came from Soviet territories or were not able to submit under the original BG. But to make a long story short, basically the difference as per the recognition of the flight cases depends on the jurisprudence. So whereas the German decision of the late 60s speaks about the need to cross a demarcation line and thus irrelevant for those who come from the former Soviet bloc in many cases. In Israel, they are to be seen as survivor. But, and here's the small but, because they're to be seen as survivors only under the Israeli Nazi invalid law, it's again an empty group because none of these people were able to come to Israel until the 1st of October 1953. And thus, they're excluded from the Israeli system and that Israeli court decision from 1973 to receive their pension. So theoretically, under Israeli law, they are to be seen as survivors as all other survivors. Their only issue is that that's the definition of the Israeli Nazi invalid law, which is bound by this cutoff date of 1953. So basically, this belongs to the group of stories to be told or to continue to discuss, address, and find solution. How do we address actually that group after so many years? I think that in the last few years there has been a progress or a certain understanding of the need to address this issue from all relevant sides, and I hope that in your other hat, not as a viewer or listener, as negotiator, I do hope that you will have a lot of success in continuing the fight that is a well fought war.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Churches, for your remarks and for explaining further and complicating further the issue. But yes, I forgot to mention that 3 different positions and 3 different narratives about what should be the beginning of the first year of the restitution. But I don't know if it would be a good thing or a bad thing if the Serbian part would split from Bosnia for the Jewish restitution, because I personally don't believe that the Serbian part is the main issue in the restitution talk, or they would like to join Jews in the suffering during the Second World War, and they had right because they were victims and their property was confiscated as well. So many times among the Jewish documents you can find also documents of looted Serbian property as well. So sometimes they were usually located at different parts in the Ustaša regime, but sometimes those documents can be found together. And also to answer the question about the political sensitivity of Muslim-Jewish relations, yes, thank you. I forgot to mention it is a very important issue, because I believe as scholars and as human beings, we need to respect all the victims of the violent 20th century in Bosnia. But I believe that local Muslims do not want to assume the role of perpetrators in the Second World War, while in the archives it is rather clear that they were, along with local Croatian population, they were the one who appropriated Jewish property during the Second World War. It is very clear because the property was, after confiscation, was formally sold to the people, so you can actually see the names of the people who bought those Jewish shops and the other properties. So, and in Bosnia, it is it is very clear to distinguish according to the name, because each community is sticking to their names and last names. So according to name and last name, especially in, I think in a Muslim case, you can distinguish the ethnicity of the people based on their names and surnames. But yes, it is a sensitive political question, because to begin, the righteous restitution of Jewish property in Bosnia, you will have the domestic population will have to face the high level of complicity with the Ustasha regime, that they are descendants of those people, so that their forefathers did. So I think it would be the most it would be the hardest part, that the first social recognition and then eventually the legal recognition will. Maybe they will eventually agree to some kind of restitution law, but the part about social recognition of what happened, and that you cannot blame Nazis for everything. Well, Bosnia was formally independent state of Croatia was formally condominium of the Nazi Germany, the northern part and the southern part by the fascist Italy. However, the extermination camps, most of the, if not all, the extermination camps and in situ mass executions were carried out by domestic regime, not by the Nazis, when it comes to Bosnia. So you cannot blame the Nazis for what happened to the. They participated. They looted some of the Jewish movable property, especially I would say, but when it comes to the immovable property, we should look inside the Bosnian realm, not find not find the perpetrators outside. So it would be the most difficult part to admit how much they participated in the Holocaust, I would say.
Thank you very much for the questions. I will start with the question, Mr. Fisher, about is there anything in the trials about movable property? In the civil cases, in civil trials, I looked, no. But let me say that I did not find all materials of these trials, only the court decisions. So in those, I'm only specifically referring to this real estate or stores. Or I started to look in criminal cases trials, so in war crime trials that took place. It seemed to be that there are more details there about the movable properties, including because there are more detailed, for example, testimonies from Jewish survivors or Gentile eyewitnesses who mention about some of these robberies of, including, Judaica or other movable property. And I think, if I remember correctly, there are also a lot of details about movable robbery, mass dispossession of movable property in the documents collected by the Romanian branch of the World Jewish Congress. They conducted a massive investigation in the country in 1945, collected tens of thousands of individual fish, a lot of data, including handwritten short or a bit longer narratives by survivors in their names, but also in the name of the families, about the losses they suffered, including, of course, deportation, torture, killing, but also about property. So some of them refer to movable property too. That would be a good, I think, I just crossed my mind, that would be a good place to look for details about that. The second question about what happened with Jewish communal property, or property belonging to Jewish organizations. So Antonescu regime expropriated that type of property as well. Not completely, but for sure. I mean, we know they expropriated sometimes Jewish schools, hospitals, even cemeteries. Even in Bucharest, it's a very famous case. Sevastopol cemetery in central downtown Bucharest was basically destroyed, somehow resembling, with the fate of the Sephardic cemetery in Thessaloniki, very Salonika. After collapse of Antonescu regime, several, it's not clear how many, but many of these communal properties were returned, but gradually, only it took several years. how do I know about that? I mean, I read in some of the ego documents, for example, the chief rabbi of Romania talks about that. But also, the problem is that the Jewish community and Jewish organization, they lose these properties again because of the communists, some through naturalizations, others basically in late 40s, early 50s, the community leaders, by now, the traditional Jewish leaders had been expelled away from the country. So the chief rabbi, Alexander Shafran, had to leave and flee the country. In 47, he was expelled. Wilhelm Fildermann, the traditional leader, he also went into hiding and flees, maybe 47, 48. So there are new Jewish leaders of the communist regime, especially from the, what might call local Yevsektia, the Jewish Democratic Committee. So basically they donate them to the state because the argument is that now that the Jews enjoyed equality under communist regime, they don't need this special institution. They don't need special schools or social institutions or hospitals because they benefit from all the public institutions. So actually, Chief Rabbi Shafran mentioned that in his memoir that they also pressure him to donate them, but he refused. He said, no, these have been built throughout centuries. The community cannot just give away these institutions, social institutions. But basically, they are lost by early 1950s. Most of them are gone, except synagogues, a few cemeteries.
I want to thank all our participants, all our panelists for giving really detailed, formative, really illustrating the scope of what we're working on today is sort of the child of the Luxembourg Agreement and how it has been providing a framework for opportunities and action that we're really in the process of maintaining and going on an ongoing basis. WJRO is doing a research project in Bosnia-Herzegovina as we speak, looking at studying property, both communal and individual property. We hope to make this area continued priority and focus for us, but it is one of the things that is, as you've heard, very difficult, very complex, and a very different set of circumstances, which is why I described as out of the box that we've been talking about earlier. So I thank all our panelists for illustrating that, for helping us understand it better, and helping shine a light on what is a current issue, not just an historical issue as well. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my colleague Nachliel Disson here, who runs our office in Jerusalem. And if you're anyone from Israel is interested in further work on this or further connection, Nachliel is always around and is an essential part of our work on this as well. And not to say that it's the most important thing, but perhaps I'll extend our collective thanks to all the panelists and participants for keeping us on schedule. As a matter of fact, for letting us out for the coffee break even a few minutes early, considering we started a little late. That is not the least of the debt that we owe you all. Thank you.